Not one person who's ever accomplished anything of worth in life has ever been happy.
It's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, and I'm tired of it.
This is it. This is the break.
They didn't see you for what you are, a goddamn star.
You in?
I'm in.
It's showtime!
I'm gonna get this. You'll see.
Hey, Jennifer Walden here for Mix's 2023 Emmy Awards season virtual event, talking about the sound on Amazon Prime Video's The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, episode 506, the Testi-Roastial. Joining me are Emmy-winning supervising sound editor re-recording mixer Ron Bochar and Emmy-winning production sound mixer Mathew Price. So both won a 2020 Emmy for sound mixing on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Ron, Mathew, thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Sure.
So let's talk about the opening of this episode. So after Midge does her stand-up, we're treated to a wonderfully chaotic sequence that's preceding the roast of Susie Meyerson. There's an energetic Elton John song called Susie playing. And then there's different crowds, like on the street, in the event room, the staff in the kitchen. What were some of your challenges in capturing the sound for the sequence and then mixing it?
Well, from my end, from the very beginning, Amy and Dan, our showrunners and directors, pretty much wanted Elton to carry that entire sequence. When you get dictated by them to do that, it doesn't mean that it's only going to be that, though. They love detail. They love to have everything they possibly can crammed in, as long as they can still get what they want from the energy of that music. And, you know, we want to hear certain lines, but we had everything done. We had a lot of walla, we had a lot of group outside, indoors, we had the whole routine. And as we were mixing it, they kept pushing for more and more to get Elton to be the big driving force. So, you know, we had to pick and choose, basically. What do you want to hear here? What do you want to hear here? Like the knife into the table, we had to have that as one big one right off the bat. And you had to have certain characters, not so much for us to have to understand, but they were insistent on knowing that, like, when Susie finally enters the club, the Friar Club, it's not like we needed to continue with people talking or whatever like that. We needed to have like a sense of welcome, like they were happy that she finally had gotten there. So there's a lot of shift that happens at that point in that crowd. We don't really hear a lot of specific, oh, Susie, or whatever like that. It's more of just the whole tone in the room shifts at that point. So again, the kind of challenges that we've always had with Maisel is cramming everything they want to get in that one track.
And on the production side, you know, what were you capturing in this? As Ron said, there are some lines that you hear, but they weren't critical. Were you miking everyone up that was there and had speaking lines, or how did that work?
Well, with Mrs. Maisel, the camera moves are always so vast and unexpected sometimes. So we tend to wire everyone, or almost everyone, almost all the time when we can, especially in big rooms like that with a lot of people, because we wind up seeing everything. Amy especially loves to do wide shots and lets scenes play out. It's all very theatrical, the way she designs her shots. The first opening sequence was mostly playback because they really wanted to drive it. We did a lot of playback on set for timing. A lot of it's for our Steadicam operators and the actors, so that they're kind of, you know, in sync together with a certain flow and a certain pacing, especially. They're, you know, Amy and Dan are all about pacing. But when it comes to critical dialogue, we may duck the playback down for a minute, or we'll pick it up on a different shot. I always, you know, they know we always get it clean no matter what. I mean, at least one take or another. So that was it for the opening sequence. But yeah, that was a lot of Elton John right at the top.
And for the podium mic, was that practical, or was that just a prop? Was that something that you were recording?
No, we had two really nice Sheps microphones up there. I put an old-fashioned windscreen on it because our prop people, our set dressers, wanted to obviously look um, period accurate. So, but I had these Sheps cardioid capsules up there because it's just beautiful sounding mics. And the tricky part was the head turns, because they would talk from one side of the room to the other. But everyone up there was also wired because I'd like to give Ron and our dialogue editor, Sarah, all the choices they could possibly have. And in a situation,
and we use them, and we use them. We use every mic you give us, more than likely.
Yeah, and in a situation like that, when you have a big room with a lot of crowd reactions, we like to get those in the moment. Sometimes we'll do clean stuff on camera, but as with a lot of the Midge performance stuff, we've tried it. As a production mixer, you want to get the production tracks as clean as possible. But on the stand up and some of the comedy stuff, when you ask your backgrounds to be quiet, it just sucks all the air out of the room. And all the energy's gone. So we let it play and cross our fingers that our dialogue editor and Ron could save it, and they always do.
And it's a comedy act, so if they're not laughing in the room, I mean, that kind of messes it up for the comedian.
Well, Rachel got really good at it, like playing it even so. But we had a lot of day players come in over. I'm not talking about necessarily this episode, but we had a lot of day players come in. Like she'll be at a comedy club and she'll see somebody else's act. And when we tried it with them, it was not successful. There was something tricky that we did in the kitchen, but I don't know if you want to get to that yet.
Yeah, sure.
And I think it worked out. It was, I thought, kind of ballsy on my part. Dan was directing this episode anyway, not Amy, if I remember right. Is that right, Ron? Dan's episode.
Stands.
There's a scene when Susie's sitting on the counter and she's smoking a joint, and the kitchen guys are singing along and all that, and she's talking to them, but they wanted to get their singing. I wanted to get their singing clean. We gave them earwigs and we had playback, or they just sang live. I don't remember that now.
I think they had earwigs because we had them pretty clean.
That's right. But it was tricky because there was overlapping dialogue. So we did a shot that was over Susie's shoulder, and I asked Alex Borstein to mime her dialogue so that it wouldn't overlap. Because that's right, she was talking over their singing, with her assistant. So I actually had them mime the dialogue so we can get that clean. And then when we turned around, clean on them, we got it clean. So Dan Palladino was very suspicious, but it worked out really well, and it preserved all the tracks for editorial.
That's awesome. And then there was that other singing scene in this episode where Susie's sister Tess gets up and
Emily,
sings her disco hit song.
She's a treat.
Yeah.
No, that was live.
So how did you handle that on set? That was live?
Yeah, it was. When it comes to singing in general, I always treat singing as if it's a vocal performance. It's melodic instead of dialogue. Essentially, it's the same for me, and I want to preserve the performance. So I didn't want her to have to lip sync to it because it was kind of a quirky timing wise and all that. And she was doing all this movement, and I think it would have been hard to lip sync. I mean, they always pre-record any tracks we might do live later on because you never know on the day someone could have a sore throat. Some actors are not necessarily comfortable singing live at the time. I mean, in the episode 4 with the big garbage, the trash can scene and all that, Emily didn't want to sing live. I think there's too much going on for her. So that she lip synced. But we gave her an earwig with the production track, sans vocals, and she sang live to the background track. And it worked out really well.
The way we use it in the Friar Club, it's a playback done specifically for her, basically. When she says hit it, it's like somebody backstage hits the play button and it starts playing through their PA system. And in the beginning, she did sing along with it. Wasn't exactly in sync or in tune with her singing along with it. Dan and I and Amy, we tried different ways to keep her in like singing along with herself all the way through. We did that a few times and that was pretty damn funny. But then we realized, no, we want it to play as if she's not necessarily lip syncing, but she's singing, like treat it as if she's performing. And then at the end, sneak it in with the fact that she's singing along and really not perfectly in tune. I mean, the idea is, this is something she did 10 years ago, and she's really not that good. So it was a lot of fun the way we just kept playing with that particular moment.
So what I loved about this episode is that we go into all of these flashbacks of Susie's career. There's the Triple Crown Day in 1970 when they're on the golf course.
No way. I like the Dodgers. I got them for the pennant and the series. Hey, Saul, what do you think?
To this day, no one knows what she said to him. Whether it was just her passion for the screenplay or a promise to control the budget, or hell, she could have had pictures of him rogering a donkey or something. Who knows? She had eyes everywhere. Whatever she said...
The pictures are go.
What?
Close the deal by the end of day. Susie will give you the terms. Whatever you need.
But Saul...
Just make it happen.
Boom. Deal 1. Done. But she ain't finished.
So in terms of the mix, how did you treat the flashbacks in relation to the roast?
From my end, the roast had all the regular scenes, whether it's in the roast or during the flashbacks that take place in regular rooms or anything like that. We would treat those as if they were standalone scenes. They'd be reverbed properly, they'd be fully Foleyed, fully affected, whatever we were like dealing with on that kind of a level. But then when, like, if the MC went to voiceover during one of the flashbacks, we would dry him up and let him just be as punchy as possible for all of the voiceover stuff. And we treated it that way for everyone. We made sure everyone that when they were off the regular stage or whatever like that, or like the guys sitting around talking about, stories, and then you'd go to one of the flashbacks, same thing. Their voices would go from being this more conversational in a room mixed together with a bunch of other guys to a very focused, specific voiceover type thing, more compression, a little more punch to it all. And that way, it allows your ear not to like remember where you are. Now you're being told a story. It's a whole different kind of approach.
When I first read the script, I thought Dan really nailed it. It was, it had the whole season up to that episode had raised so many questions with the time jumps and the flash forwards and the flashbacks within the flash forwards, et cetera, et cetera. And it just answered so many questions, which I think one reason why we submitted a specific episode, because it's a great standalone episode. It's kind of the top of the arc before the last bunch of episodes.
It is also an episode that hadn't had anything done like that before. I mean, we hadn't had the Triple Crown, we hadn't had all the flashback stuff. We hadn't had as much music kind of used the way we were using it. Usually we have music that's, it's meant to elicit an idea or a feeling or whatever like that, and then it turns into a radio in the back of a kitchen. In this case, no, it was full frontal stuff we were doing all the way through it. And man, that's fun working with music like that.
I also loved the dialogue processing that you did on this show, like when they're in the Friar Club and the camera changes position, relative to the podium. I thought it was really great. It was very subtle, but you just got the idea that like, you're this much closer, you're that much farther away based on like how much room was and the EQ that was on the dialogue tracks.
Right. And that's something we've been doing since the beginning on Maisel. We've been experimenting on how to like give it that subtle shift so that you believe the shifts, that it's not always the same setting all the time. I have to thank Amy and Dan for that. They didn't know exactly how we were going to do it. And it took us a while to get that, in season 1, how we were going to deal with, Midge on stage. And, it's just evolved throughout the course where it's a given. We have to do that. That's the way we're always going to treat it.
Well,
I'm glad you noticed.
Yes, I know, right?
I'm glad you noticed.
And when I mix Maisel, it's always perspective for me. I mean, we wire everybody, but I always use a lot of boom in it. When I editorialize, for better or worse, if someone's walking away from us, or towards us, I'll play the radio mic in relation. Like I'll have them walk away and come back to us so we can feel it. Because I just don't like the standard TV method of everything in your face all the time. Because it just feels so artificial and dry.
And the way we prep using his boom all the time, as long as we can. And I'm always mixing the lavs in with that. I need the lavs for the fact that, we have 80-page scripts crammed into 50 minutes, then they're speaking awful fast. So I need to get every vowel and consonant, and I get that from the lavs. But I get the room and I get the sense of space from what he's able to record with the boom.
And hopefully he gets a sense of how it would sound as a final mix. I mean, it's my ego, but when I'm on set, I'm like, I always want to think, they can just take what I do and put it right up on screen. They don't have to do anything to it. Of course, it's nonsense. But this way I approach it.
Sadly, it's not 5.0 that you're recording.
No, I know. But that's my approach to mixing on set. I want it to sound like if I was a viewer watching the show, like with all the perspective and the clarity of the lavs, but mixed with space so that it sounds real and rich and open.
Yeah.
So on those super long shots from the podium, are you standing in the back of the room with a boom capturing that perspective?
Oh yeah, we had a boom open all the time. It's often two booms also. In rooms like that, I'll try to get mics in different spaces, different places in relation to things, so you can get a slightly tighter perspective and a slightly wider perspective. But because I knew that the podium mics were really what was going to carry. For anything that happened at the podium, I wasn't, the boom was really for ambience and for air to open it up.
But you weren't PA'd at all. I mean, that wasn't going through a system coming out of speakers up there. It wasn't.
I don't think we had a PA in the room for the audience. Sometimes we will have, in a bigger space, we will do that just to fill in for the people in the background to react to. Like in a room, like we've done that in the Walford Theater. When Midge was filling the place up, we had a speaker in the back, so because we didn't want her to yell. And sometimes we had it
in the USO show.
Show, and sometimes we'll have it facing her so she can get a better sense of how she sounds in the room.
Right.
Too. But I don't like to do that too much because, again, you don't want it to overlap your principal dialogue where you're hearing stuff. And that's for Ron to calibrate.
Yeah, get it right in post. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which he does. It sounds fabulous.
Thank you. It post began when he started shooting track on location, though. He doesn't get away without being part of post.
And they're always open to me coming down to mixes and set. I mean, Maisel was really unique in so many ways. Definitely the most fun job I've ever had.
Yeah, we got to be friends. Yeah.
Yes, Ron and I have become, I've never had a relationship with a post person before. Like Ron and I, we go out to lunch and hang out and stuff like that.
Yeah. I got to say, that's pretty unique. I've, rarely do you see people cross the line from production to post. So.
Well, we confer a lot. And because Maisel throws so many left curves at us on set, I'm like, the thing is, the first bunch of episodes, Ron's usually not on until like the 5th or 6th episode of the season, right? 4th. So, I'm kind of.
But we talk, we definitely talk even before.
Yeah, sometimes I'll be in a situation where I'll say, Ron, this is going on. What do you think? And he'll give me his feedback, and we'll always try to incorporate it because I know it's all about the finished product.
Or Ron, they're shooting in an armory.
Oh yeah, episode 4.
Yeah, with a highway right next to it, and their construction. What are we going to do?
Yeah, the elevated train on Jerome Avenue in the Bronx. That was fun.
Right.
But
right.
It's New York. I've been the New York mixer for 35, 40 years. It doesn't faze me anymore. Noise. It is what it is, and. You wire them the best as you can. And now that the digital tools of the last 5 to 10 years, it's extraordinary using isotope and all kinds of ways to clean up tracks that they could never do before. And that frees me up to concentrate more on the performances and not worry quite so much about background, especially when I have no control over it anyway. I used to go home
I think my
whatever
favorite...
hair I had left out of my head, and now not so much.
I think my favorite call from you was when COVID hits, so everything's going to move inside, and everybody's going to work on it from a closed set perspective. But at the studio, they came out with these huge vents and fans
Filtration fans,
in order to cycle the air so that, everybody would be clean without, it was noisy. They shut it down at least every time they shot, for the most part. I mean, we didn't end up with anything that was going to be a problem, but that was like really a serious concern and a really serious worry, because so much of Maisel is controlled and needs to be controlled on a set. And if all of a sudden we're introducing fans, and ventilation systems that we never had before, how would that season sound? Would it sound any different or not? And, we lucked out. It wasn't that bad.
We were in this. We filmed mostly at Steiner Studios, which is a beautiful space. Except that for the last 2 seasons, they took over this warehouse space that was not soundproof. And one of my primary responsibilities is make sure that if any external noises get in, that they're period appropriate. But they were filming. They built the Wolford set, and they built the Gordon Ford set, and the Toots Shore set, and a lot of interim sets. Was the Button Club there? No, not the Button Club, but the gambling parlor was there, and it was like right off a major trucking street, and because it wasn't soundproof, they had to have these massive HVAC units outside to keep it cool, especially in the warm weather. And they were right outside these windows that are not insulated. So we're constantly fighting that. We're constantly trying to find ways. Oh, and then they would sneak like little fans where windows would go, on one of the sets, and all of a sudden rolling where like there's a fan somewhere. And this is a huge space. This is the same space they shot a lot of West Side Story in. Huge warehouse space. So we were constantly tracking down noisemakers. But that's what we do.
So I have time for just one more question. So why did you guys choose this episode for Emmy consideration? I mean, there's so many great episodes this season, all the seasons, but why this one?
Well, from my end, this one was kind of a microcosm of every single Maisel episode we'd ever done. It had a live performance with Tess. It had Midge performing at the very beginning. And if anything, it was a different kind of Midge because we made Midge successful in that opening. She's got many more crowd than we ever had in any kind of a Midge performance. It had new stuff for us, like the way we were using music throughout. It had, the usual issues of how do you, process something so it sounds like it's on a podium. And then it had the depth of audience that we had to have reactions for. So it kind of was, like if you were going to distill Mrs. Maisel into one little episode of the best of everything, I felt that 6 kind of did that. And it did it alarmingly well and beautiful and made it into a standalone of its own. Then that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah, I usually take Ron's lead when we decide which episode to submit because he's so much more versed with all the intricacies of everything that went into the final mix, which I am not, except when I watch it gleefully.
It was hard to pick, though. I mean, it was between either this one or the season finale,
which was terrific, also. On so many ways.
It's just always difficult to pick what you would want to put forward. I mean, you kind of hope everybody's really judging you more on the entire breadth of the season, even though you have to put one good thing forward, because Maisel's a special show. It just is one of those shows that you work on that it's got so much depth to it, and it's got directors that don't want to treat it like television. It's got sets that are just huge. It's got these camera work that makes me go crazy. I've got to like pan something left and then they moved it over to the right. No, it's back to, it's just constantly playing around, and you're still working with a television mix schedule. So,
yeah, which has got to be
it's
tough.
A challenge.
Yeah.
Every episode's like a major motion picture. That's the way they treat it. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as Ron said, our episodes, they're 80 to 90 page scripts, and very little gets cut out in the final edit. You know,
Very little gets
I
cut
pick
out.
up little things like, oh, what happened to that? What happened to that? But it's really minimal. I also love the way Six used music because normally Maisel is very classic oriented in terms of jazz standards and vocal songs. So that we were using pop music was so much fun, especially Three Dog Night and JC Superstar. The clip that I think you'll show is one of my favorite scenes. You know, and it was wonderful. I love structure where people tell stories and there's different sides of it, and you get to see that version. No, that's not what happened. This is what happened. No, this I was there. Well, I know someone who was there, and this is what happened. That kind of stuff. I love that kind of storytelling.
Oh, and then we have Midge at the end with Susie.
Oh my God, broke my heart. On set, we were crying.
The VCR and that whole
Oh, yeah.
thing. I mean, very emotional, but we wanted it to still sound like a crappy VCR from back then, and that it's not really aligning right. And how are we going to like pull that one off? And
there'd be no Maisel without Alex Borstein. She's just, I can't say enough good things about her. She's phenomenal. Of course, Rachel. That goes without saying.
Well, excellent job on the show, as always. I always find it entertaining. And, all of those camera pans and camera movement that, are so tough for you, Ron, they are appreciated by me, the audience member. And the fact that you pan all that sound and get it right. And the dialogue always sounds amazing. So great job, Ron and Mathew. And best of luck to you both this Emmy season.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
If we ever have an Emmy season.
Yeah.